Hello, lovers and listicles. My name is TV's Guy, and it has been a year since the last time I did this, so I figure with a bunch of updates and reworks and new lore and yada yada yada, probably it's time to do one of these again, isn't it? So, before we get into any of that though, hello everybody! How y'all doing? Yeah, y'all doing okay? With the world being in such a wonderful state as it is? I hope so. I also hope that the audio is okay, like that the music isn't too loud, and that you can hear me blabbering into the microphone. Let me know in chat if you can't. And let's, holy good lord, there's like 450 people here. What the hell? That's a lot of people. I'm just gonna make a tier list, guys. It's not... okay. Well, I'm not complaining. Hello, everybody. So, the way we're gonna do this is similar to last year, if you remember. And using this website called Tier Maker, I got a bunch of champion icons. We're just gonna grab them in alphabetical order and sort them into one of these following categories. S tier, which is obviously the best one. And then there's ABC, which is like, there are various shades of not perfect. And then there's F, which are just bad. I don't like them. And then we have uncategorizable. Now, this is a special category specifically for champions that are like just desperately in need of a rework. And it's kind of like they're so old and from such a different state of the game that it's kind of unfair to even try and rank them because they're just like, Shaco will go into this category, for example. So will Corki. Once we get to them, we'll talk about why. So, oh god, no, 500 people. Oh, this is gonna be stressful. Okay. So last time I did this, it took like about 5 hours. And that's probably gonna be a long one again. I think I can do it a little bit faster. But it's probably gonna be a long one again. So I'm gonna stop a couple of times and get some tea so that my voice doesn't, you know, explode in my throat. But outside of that, yeah, super chats are available if you want them, and that's probably the best. Chat is going kind of fast right now. It's probably the best way to get me to see something if you want me to. There's also Streamlabs, which also does the donation thing, but hang on, I actually don't know if that pops up correctly on actually, I should remove that. Don't use Streamlabs right now, because I don't think it's gonna pop up on screen correctly. Yeah, gotta removing that one for now. What a bother. Let's get into it then. And we'll start at the very beginning with my dear lad, Aatrox. So, for those of you who are around, like, last year, you may remember what I did with some of the old champions, and you'll may be surprised that some of them have moved places since the last time I did this. That's because my opinions are mercurial. I change my mind every 45 seconds, and I don't have any consistent principles about anything. So if you find that one champion was in like F tier last year and all of a sudden they moved to S tier, that's just because I'm a weirdo, and don't think about it too hard. This is only a set of opinions, and they shouldn't probably be taken too seriously. Like, some people in the comments of the last one got really upset that I put a champion in a tier that they didn't like really as though I had condemned them to hell or something, which I think is perhaps a little extreme. Anyway, Aatrox goes, at least insofar as my opinion, into A tier. And there's a couple of reasons why. I really like Aatrox. Like, I like his lore, I like his story, I like how that's executed upon, I like the idea of this sort of constantly regenerating flesh golem using the bodies of his opponents to regenerate himself. There's a lot to like about Aatrox. But he's also like, he's just a demon guy. Like, he's just it's not something that I look at him and go, oh, this could only exist in League of Legends. It's like, no, yeah, I could see that being in like Diablo or any number of other dark fantasy games of various kinds. That is not really, it's not really that unique to League of Legends. He's just a demon guy with a big sword. We've seen that kind of thing before. So A tier because like he's good and he's distinct and he's unique. He has an interesting visual language, but not S because he's not like we've seen stuff like this before. Which moves us on to everyone's favorite fox girl, Ahri. Now, Ahri for me is like, I waver between putting her in A tier and B tier because like I kind of want to put her in A tier because like she's nice. Like she looks really cool. She has the kimono and she's hot and it's like, it's a good design and it does pretty much what the story demands of her. Like Ahri's story, which has changed substantially over time, is essentially that she's a fox demon who kind of accidentally goes around seducing people and sucking the life out of them and murdering them. And yeah, that's kind of there. Like the succubus aspect of her is there. The seductress aspect of her is there. But it's also like, she's also just a hot girl with animal ears. And it's like, again, it's the uniqueness factor where it's like, this is not just Aatrox levels of not that unique. It's like, it's just a hot girl with fox ears. And there's a million of them. And I don't know that any of them are that special, really. Which is why, ultimately, I feel like she's in B tier. Because she's just a hot girl. And League of Legends has 12 dozen of those, and none of them are that distinct from each other or interesting outside of just like their costuming and their hair. So, have my opinions been controversial yet? We'll get to it, I'm sure. Aatrox belongs in the double A tier, the memo sky. Yeah. This is true, Nazalutsu. Let's see, where were we? Right. Moving on to our favorite ninja girl. Now, Akali has had an absolutely excellent rework, and I am tempted, at least initially, maybe we'll move her around later, to hit her up into the S tier. And specifically because her aesthetic, like, League of Legends is generally kind of a generic game, which is one of the unfortunate things about it, is that it draws from such a wide pool of different and disparate influences that is like, yeah, it ultimately ends up being kind of a generic fantasy world. It has some unique aspects. One of the things I think they handled really well is having Akali look both like the generic ninja girl that she sort of ultimately kind of has to be since she's from Ionia and the Kinku Order, blah, 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 but also having an expression where I look at that and I go, oh yeah, that's a League of Legends champion. Like, there's something about the specific combination of especially the iconography of her tattoos and the way that she's put together, that just, yeah, that strikes unique. And another thing that I quite like about her is that, especially in her splash art, maybe less so in her character model, but in her splash art, she's like a hot lady. She's like an athletically inclined hot lady, but the way that she's framed, especially in her splash art, but also in a lot of the other media, it focuses a lot more on her athleticism, her muscularity, her power, her strength, her agility, rather than just being, hey, is this titty over here with the booby tits, woohoo! And that gets extra points from me. Like, that's one of my biases, is like, I'm tired of just the titties all the time, because there's such a thing as too much of that. But when we have this, where the focus is on the power, the danger, when there is defined muscle and actual abs going on, hey, that's nice. It's slightly different. And because I can't really think of a way to improve her, like, I really can't think of how would you do this any different to make it more interesting within the context of League of Legends, I don't have anywhere else to put her, really. Like, she could go in A tier, I suppose, but I like her, so she goes in S tier. Oh, hello, 1,000 people. Great. Oh, boy. Hi, how you all doing? That's many. Am I going to consider new or old Volibear? You'll see, Derpfish. You'll see, although you can probably catch his icon somewhere here on the list. Right. Moving on then to our dear friend Alistar, the Minotaur. Alistar the Minotaur is a Minotaur. That's yeah. He's a Minotaur, and outside of being purple, there's not. He's just a Minotaur, and he's one of those old champions in League of Legends from way back in the day, when League of Legends was literally just a game where it's like, oh yeah, we have some summoners and they summon people who from place let's put Anubis into the game and an angel and also a Minotaur, because like why the hell not? Where there wasn't really a consistent internal League of Legends universe from which to draw interesting aesthetic ideas, and Alistar is very much from that era. Now he has had some lore updates that make him substantially more interesting, especially recently, whereas like the whole thing about Noxus and the tribes and blah blah blah, but like he's just a Minotaur. Like, there's nothing interesting or unique about him. He's just a Minotaur. And outside of the purple coloring, nothing really sets him apart. Anyway, there was a super chat, but it's been retracted, so I don't know what it said. But thank you for the money, Hedge Knight. I hope it wasn't anything important. Right. Next, then. Amumu. Amumu is one of those champions that I'm kind of tempted to put into the uncategorizable category, because again, he's so old, and he's from such a different time in League of Legends history, and he is just not tied in well to any... Like, Amumu is a desert Egyptian-themed champion from before Shurima was a thing. Like, before we even, like, fully understood what Shurima was, before Azir, before the Sun Disk, before there was any Shuriman aesthetic to draw from, we have this little pile of... toilet paper, walking around, crying, being sad all over the place. And his character model especially, and just his general design aesthetic, shows that age, because I believe in the current state of his lore, theoretically, he's still supposed to be a Yordle of some kind? A Yordle prince? Something along those lines? Actually, let me check. What the heck did they do to Amumu recently? I've got the universe page open in the other... Yeah, no, he's not even a Yordle anymore. They got rid of that bit. So, yeah. They've sort of tried... Like, Amumu is a joke character. He always has been. He's the sad mummy who can't have any friends. And while he has had one of the inarguably best music videos in League of Legends ever, Amumu, sad mummy, is also like... I give him a few points, because he is at least unique to League of Legends, like nobody else has anything like him, so he doesn't go in F tier. But he's also like, he's in desperate need of an update. He really needs an update to clarify him both as like where he's supposed to fit into the League of Legends universe. Like, is he a Yordle? Is he a small child human? Is he from Shurima? Because in that case, he should probably have some kind of Shuriman aesthetic somewhere going on him. He's in desperate need of an update, but at least, like, I have never seen another champion or other character design like him in anything else. Oh, Hedge Knight, it was a correction that Ari's clothes is a Korean hanbok and not a kimono. Yes, true. I'm bad at fashion. Good catch. Thank you. Leading us on to Anivia. Now, Anivia is one of those where it's like, I kind of feel a little Alistar about her in the sense that she's just an ice bird. Like, it's just an ice bird. And there's kind of a lack of a lot of interesting stuff. She's also kind of brought down by the fact that, especially in her character model, she's old. And you can really tell that she's like this old, lumpy, kind of misshapen thing, where I think a more sleek sense of stylism would do a lot to help her. Like, not even a full visual update, just a updated character model that makes her much more ice-like, rather than being this lumpy clump of rocks that happens to be blue and flies around. But she's a cryo-phoenix. Like, she's a phoenix, but she's made of ice. And that is a clever little thing. Like, maybe that's a reference to something else that I don't know about, but I don't think I've seen that anywhere else, like the idea of an ice phoenix as such. And Anivia does have, at this point, some pretty damn good lore, tying her in with, like, the elemental nature of the Freljord, and Ornn, and Volibear, and that whole aesthetic and mythology in a way that makes a certain degree of sense, that she represents the traveling winter, like, and relief from the storm, that people, nomads following her around, and it makes sense that she's a bird in that context. So, not great, but not quite as bad as something like an Alistar or an Amumu. I still think she needs a visual update, like, soonish, especially with Volibear starting to clarify a lot more about the mythology of the Freljord. She kind of needs some time. And as people are pointing out in chat, yes, she's also, like a more lumpy Articuno, essentially. Okay, we're making good pace so far. Let's talk about Annie. She's another one of those very, very old champions whose lore state has progressed somewhat beyond the ability of her character model to keep up with. Annie, in the lore of League of Legends currently, is the child of some Noxian commander dude who lived out in the woods with his new wife after Annie's mom was actually dead, and then Annie had a stepsister, but then because things are tragic and miserable and nobody in the League of Legends universe can be happy ever, Annie has fire powers, which tend to manifest when she gets upset, which happens a lot when you're a child with a stepsister, because there's child fighting. And then Annie and her stepsister are out in the woods one day, and her stepsister falls in the river and drowns right in front of Annie, and Annie's stepmom is, like, not happy about that and blames Annie. Annie isn't happy about that either, so she gets so sad that her fire powers explode, she burns down the entire house and kills her own father in the process, and also her stepmom, who she murders with tippers. That's her lore, which is just like this endless parade of absolutely horrifying, miserable tragedy. Her character design, on the other hand, is like, she's a schoolgirl, she wears makeup for some reason, she has eyeliner and cat ears and pink and leg warmers, I don't know, and that's a little bit of a mismatch between what the story is trying to express about the character and what the character themselves are actually expressing in the character design. The putative justification for Annie's look at this point is that her strategy for survival as she wanders around the woods as a feral child is to ingratiate herself with people and go, oh, my family is dead and I need help, blah, blah. So they'll give her food and clothes, and then eventually she'll just either leave or murder them with fire. And that's why she's wearing this stuff right now, is because some friendly family clothed her in. But the problem with that is that she's still clear, like, this is not fantasy clothes. She's wearing, like, schoolgirl outfit from contemporary modern Japan or something. And it just, And part of the reason why is that Annie is fucking old. Like, she's one of the original champions that shipped with the game back in the day, and she has had a visual update, but that visual update was long before they invented this new ultra tragic lore for her. So it's like, and that's like, I really kind of like Annie as a thing, but in terms of, like, her character design is so old and out of date that she's, like, somewhere between these two spots. Like, where it's kind of like, she just kind of needs an update, and it's kind of unfair to really harp on her, but the mismatch between her lore and what her character design is actually expressing is just so pronounced that I'm tempted to put her in F. But I'm gonna put her in uncategorizable, because it is just a fact of, like, she's just old. She's really, really old. And once they update her, we can have a more frank discussion about where her actual character design lies, but for the moment, she's just really, really old. And she sort of became bad because they updated her lore to the point where it didn't fit her character design anymore. I need to blow my nose for a second, because every time I stream, without fail, I get snotty. I don't know why that happens, but just give me a moment. There we go. Now for Captain Galaxy Brain himself, Ophelios, and his assassin sister who lives on the moon. Or in the moon, something along those lines. So Ophelios is a character I feel a little bit mixed about. And I think I talked about that back when he first came out. It's like, it's a weird mix of aesthetics, because we have this kind of modern K-poppy sort of boy band aesthetic a little bit going on with him, which is something that I believe Riot have said that he was specifically designed to appeal to. It's like they wanted that aesthetic in the game. And because of that, he has a kind of contemporary outfit with like this big overcoat giving him this Dorito shape that defines his upper torso, which does create an interesting shape language. But then on the other hand, there's the whole thing about being a Lunari and a Lunari assassin thing, where there's this weird mix of like really futuristic sci-fi aesthetics in his weapons, which are basically like laser weapons from Mass Effect or something. And then the whole idea of him being like the member of a moon cult that lives on a mountain. There's like, I feel mixed about him because I don't really know how to place him. Like, there's nothing else like him. He's unique to League of Legends. You can't say that he looks like a character from another game. But at the same time, I'm like, I feel like he's a confused design. So for me, he's like a B tier, where it's like there's a lot of good there, but there's also like a lot of, how does that tie into it? And one thing that kind of bothers me about his lore is, this is something we'll talk about when we get to Sona as well, by the way, is that you have this character who's defined by muteness. Specifically, Aphelios drinks poison that makes him mute so that his sister can send him space weapons. It's a whole thing, don't ask. But like that aspect of like the connection to his sister, especially through like the silence of the throat and being expressive in his animation, it's something that's kind of missing from his character design. Like, I don't feel like I see that very much in him, where you could do all kinds of things, like with having a cloth across his mouth or some kind of ritual tattoo that denotes his mute. Like, there's all kinds of little things you could do that kind of plays into that. Like, it's little things. There's a bunch of good stuff and a bunch of niggles that just kind of get to me. So for me, he's a B tier character, but I wouldn't like disagree with anyone who said he's a much higher tier character, because they are less bothered by the nitpicks that I am. Oh no, 1,300 people. That's a lot of people. Hello, people. You are many, and I am just one man. How can I possibly satisfy all of you? Oh dear. Anyway, say hello to my favorite punching bag in League of Legends. Well, she used to be before Kai'Sa came along. Ashe. Dear Ashe. So, a while back, you may remember, Riot did some updated voice lines for Ashe, and they gave her a joke. A funny, jokey joke. Where Ashe says, "Oh, isn't it weird how some of all of us Freljord champions just aren't wearing very many clothes at all? That's so strange." And on the one hand, that's kind of funny. But on the other hand, it's like, well, just fix her, just give her a texture update, something. You don't even have to do a model update, just fucking give her pants or something. Ashe is the war mother of the tribes of Abarosa. This is a story that's explored in her own comic series, Ashe War Mother, where she has a much better character design than this one that actually looks like it comes from the Freljord. Now, I've spoken about Ashe many times before, but the fundamental problem I have with her is not that she's hot. Like, that's fine. It's not that she's a sexy lady. That's fine. The fundamental problem I have with her is that she's from the motherfucking Freljord, the land of fur and leather and metal plates and Viking culture, like fantasy bowdlerized white Viking culture. But she runs around in this like wafer-thin little cloak and a mini skirt and thigh highs with her titties out, and she doesn't look like she's from the Freljord. She's supposed to be the war mother of the Avarosans, but she doesn't look like the war mother of anything from the Freljord. She looks like she comes from the tropics. And that's the major problem I have with her, both in terms of like the gold accents and the gray, which is just not Freljord colors at all, is she doesn't look like she's from the Freljord. And again, this is a problem with Ashe just being a really old character. She's shipped with the game. She's literally the Drow Ranger from Dota. Like, literally, she's just a carbon copy of, like, the Drow Ranger from the original Dota. And when they gave her a visual update, they didn't really bother to redefine her as a character. Like, this was back when Riot's visual updates were mostly about just, let's make the character model look not absolutely fucking terrible. Rather than let's update the character to better fit their role in the lore and the story of the game. And Ashe is kind of a victim of that, because it's like, yes, you definitely look like you are a tribal leader from the high north of the Viking people with your gold accents and your bronze boots and your thigh highs and your miniskirt and your titties out. if Ashe had been from another region, if she'd been from some warm forest region, like for Ishtal, fucking whatever, I wouldn't have so much of a problem with her, but she just like, why would you wear, even if you're Iceborn, I don't give a shit if you're Iceborn, you come from a culture whose entire fashion aesthetic is leather and fur. Even Sejuani has giant tufts of fur coming out of her armor, and her whole thing is that she's Mr. Tough Lady MacTuffson who toughs things out and who isn't bothered by anything. She still wears armor that's lined with fur, so how the hell Ashe is... Anyway, I'm gonna stop ranting now. You probably see where this is going. Ashe, I love her, but she's F tier. She's just, the character design just doesn't fit her lore at all. She needs an update, but I don't really feel like you can kind of put her in the uncategorizable tier with Annie, where you kind of forgive it because it's old, because they've had plenty of opportunities. And my recommendation with Ashe is just replace her base skin with Queen Ashe, and you solve all of her problems. Just replace her with Queen Ashe, and all of the problems are solved. But Riot refused to listen to me, and instead they make jokey jokes about how funny it is that Ashe's character design is terrible. Let's move on to something better. Aurelion Sol, the Star Dragon. Now, Aurelion is a character that I've been kind of back and forth on as a member of the roster of League of Legends, because he kind of introduced the power creep problem to the game in a big way, because Aurelion is literally one of the creators of the entire fucking... Like, he's functionally God! He makes stars. That's his whole thing, is he makes stars. And I'll just... You know how big a star is? Stars are large. They're real big, man. They're huge. And he makes those, and as you can see from his splash art, like, the scale of how big this guy is like, he's the size of a moon. And then he's like, no, I'm also on Summoner's Rift, and I'm like normal-sized, and I throw very, very small stars at people. And it's like... And that's something I've always kind of felt mixed about, because that was kind of part of the point of the 2014 lore retcon, is to remove the summoners, to kind of take that limitation of only things that summoners could reasonably summon can be parts of League of Legends. And that means they're free to do whatever the hell they want and build the universe with whatever champions that they want. And I can kind of see that, because that's what allows us to get characters like Kindred and Bard, who are some of my favorite character designs in the game. But it also introduces that big question of, like, how in the actual hell, like, I don't care how magical the crown that he's got on his head is. How did Targon manage to control him? There's questions about power level that get brought up there. On the other hand, though, questions about power level is stuff that only tedious nerds like me give a shit about. And what's his actual character design like? Well, there's a lot of really cool stuff. His character model in-game, kind of, as you can tell from this render I've got set up here, kind of suffers from not being able to quite deliver on what the splash art promises, because what the splash art promises is that he's essentially like a living starry sky, with this, essentially his face, his jaws, being the only solid part of him, and everything else is this melange of, like, coalesced stardust and cosmic material that floats around and creates constellations inside his body, which is such a fucking cool visual idea for a Star Dragon. His character model can't quite deliver on it because of technical limitations with League of Legends as a game. We'll talk about that with characters like Hecarim and Mordekaiser as well. But the concept is genuinely fantastic, and outside of all of my stupid nitpicking about, oh, this is like power level, blah, blah, that's a cool character design. That doesn't really exist anywhere else in the world. Like, I've never seen anything else quite like him, and so he technically probably should be A tier, but because I have my own little nitpicks and biases, I'm gonna go A tier, just because this is my stream, and I can categorize things however the hell I want. I need to blow my nose again. There we go. So now, let's talk. Oh my god, 1,500 people. Okay, I'm just gonna try and not look at the number, because it makes me nervous. Because that's too many. Why are there so many of you? I don't understand why. I guess this stream is good. I hope it is. God, I hope it's good, because otherwise 1,500 people are watching me make an idiot out of myself. Let's talk about Azir, the Emperor of Shurima. I like Azir a lot. I like what they did with the Ascended. Like, Azir, this is something people might not remember, but before Azir, Shurima was kind of a poorly defined region as a whole. It was a region that kind of lacked an identity outside of being Magic Egypt. It kind of lacked a sense of really solid history. So with Azir, what they introduce is the Pharaoh of the region. Like the Emperor whose legacy and lineage defines the cultural and political history of Shurima, which is something that they later expand upon substantially by talking about how the Ascended are turned into the Darkened and blah, 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 blah. But Azir being essentially a visual representative of the Shuriman Empire at its height and like the absolute peak of its power, the Emperor who commands the very sands themselves, who stands as an avatar of the sun disk, the sun itself. So they draw from Egyptian mythology and bring a hell of a lot of Ra and Horus into Azir's character design. And it's a really successful design. My one complaint about Azir, the one that I have, is that he doesn't look that much like an Ascended bird person, ultimately. Like, it looks like he's wearing a bird helmet rather than having, like, a bird head, which is the thing that, like, Nasus and Renekton do much better in terms of being, like, really obvious furries, as it were. But that's like my only real nitpick. I like the cloak, like this cloak that's made up of these segments that approximate the feathers of wings. I like the staff that has this element of being both a spear, but also kind of showing off the radiance of the sun, which is something that's incorporated into all Shuriman aesthetics nowadays. Lots of gold, lots of royal purple, which makes a lot of sense. It's just a really solid character design all around. Like, you look at this guy and you instantly understand, yeah, that's some kind of king or an emperor. It's some kind of leader. He's some kind of ruler over something. He's in a position of power. He's in a position of authority. It's a really solid character design from a storytelling perspective, and he's just cool as balls. So for me, S tier. And God damn it, why am I so congested? Oh, be glad you didn't hear me make those noises. Blah. Moving on to, I mean, I was just gonna say it right now, Bard is S tier for me, because Bard is my boy. Bard is good. Bard is just absolutely excellent. So with Bard, there's a couple of interesting things going on, because Bard is one of those characters like Aurelion Sol, who it became possible to introduce to League of Legends with the removal of the summoners, with the removal of that constraint that it needs to be things that summoners could reasonably be expected to control. And Bard is one of those because he's this cosmic entity, this sort of natural force almost in the League of Legends universe, whose entire point and purpose, like his entire identity, is that he's a caretaker who collects magical artifacts from across Runeterra and keeps them away from people who would misuse them. One thing that has disappointed me relentlessly about Bard, is that we only ever got the one goddamn story. We only ever got the one goddamn animated short from him, and they've done absolutely nothing with him since then. There are so many opportunities to use Bard as a secondary character, as like a nominal, like kind of an anti-antagonist, in the sense of him, oh, there's some super chats. I'll deal with those in a second. Of for example, he's a perfect foil for someone like Ezreal. Ezreal goes around the world and steals powerful magical artifacts from everywhere. Bard is the perfect antagonist for him in the sense that Bard doesn't give a shit about Ezreal, but he always gets there before him and steals away the big, powerful, important artifact that Ezreal wants to steal for himself. There's so many good character interactions you can have with Bard. He can be a nemesis to the Noxians because they're looking for powerful magical artifacts, and he just shows up, blows his horn, and fucks off with the thing. But that's all disappointment with how Riot has handled the character, in that they just kind of put him in the game and then never came back to him. Aesthetically, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on too, because he's hella Studio Ghibli. Like, He's just Ghibli all over the place. They went hard on the Ghibli influences, and the best thing is his mask. Because it approximates a face. It has like 2 eyes and a mouth, right? But at the same time, it's this perfect geometric shape. That kind of sells the idea of him not like he has a humanoid body, but he's not quite a human thing. That there's something else going on below the surface of this thing, that the clothes that he's wearing is like more of a suit than actually his body. And I love the use of this big powerful mane of hair to approximate both hair but also a giant beard, but without making him look old as such. There's so much good stuff going on. I love his little stilt legs. Like, those are cool. Those are just cute, and it's a nice visual aesthetic to give him. Bard is good. Bard is S tier, and League of Legends needs to do some more with the goddamn boy, because... Anyway, there's some super chats. I should probably catch up on those. You gotta admit he has the best voice lines. That was for Aurelion Sol. Yes, I kind of agree. When you get to her, how would you fix Leona? We'll talk about that when we get there. Keep being a tedious nerd and go off, you glorious artist. Excited for the stream. Thank you, Bathtub Goat. I will be tedious as hell, I promise you. Shadow Catting. Bard hype, watching this with all 9 of my Meep plushies. Aw, Meep plushies. I didn't know those existed. I should get one. Hot Tea. Thank you for the lovely gif. Apparently that's a thing you can do with Super Chat. That's cool. And a very generous one as well. Thanks for that. The Maris channel. Hey, team's gonna have a nice day, my dude. I'm trying to. I'm gonna need some tea before it's over, but I'm definitely trying to. I hope the rest of you are having a nice day watching this as well. Is Bard considered naked? No, he's very much wearing clothes, but my suspicion is that if he was naked, there would be nothing inside his clothes. Like, the clothes are like a suit for a spirit more than... Anyway, that's a whole different thing. Let's talk about Blitzcrank. So, Blitzcrank is a slightly unique champion in League of Legends in the sense that he's one of those champions that has become iconic to the game, both because of his goddamn motherfucking hook motherfucker thing shit asshole thing that kills me all the time, or at least used to back when I played the game more actively, but also just as a visual representation of the game itself. And he is a kind of unique character design. Like, you can really tell that Blitzcrank is old, like he's part of the old League of Legends aesthetic, just because of the way his body is put together. You have this giant, bulky torso and these enormous hands that are like the size of his entire body. And then you have these tiny little nothing legs with big-ass feet on them that's all supposed to enable like a very, like a clarity of animation style that would be visible on like a 640 by 800 screen. Back in the ancient days, before widescreen, before everything, like back in the very dawn of League of Legends when computers were shit and like visual fidelity was crap and the most of the game took its aesthetic cues from a Warcraft 3 mod, that's what he's designed for. Now, in his splash art, we see a much more compelling version of Blitzcrank in the sense that he's been cleaned up a lot. Like, his body is this sphere now rather than this lumpy misshapen nothing thing. His hands have a much more interesting aspect in that they actually look like complex mechanical things instead of just lumps with lumps on them with a side of lumps on a dish made out of lumps also. But it's also kind of undeniable that, like, as a character, he is just a robot. Like, he's just a robot, dude. He looks like a robot, and the big problem for me in terms of his lore versus his actual execution is that in the lore of League of Legends, Blitzcrank is supposed to be a steam golem, like the first of his kind, a prototype that happened to go sentient somehow, and now concerns, well, itself. Actually, I'm being wrong here. Blitzcrank doesn't have a gender. They have specifically changed it so that he's referred to as an it or a they. Now, I believe. He used to be referred to as male, but that seems to have been changed. Will you talk about skins? No, Johnny, I will not talk about skins because this live stream is going to be 5 hours long already, and if I brought skins into it, we would be here until next week, probably. So, not this time. We might do a skin stream at some later point, but I understand the interest, believe me. So, like, I'm tempted to put Blitzcrank in S tier, obviously, because he's naked. And because he's naked, it has to go in S tier. That's just the rules. But in terms of being a character design, he is just a robot guy. And he's an interesting one. Like, he looks unique enough to League of Legends that I kind of... I want to put him in B tier to be generous. He probably belongs in C tier, though. but I want to put him in B tier just to be generous, because he's naked. Speaking of naked, here's a character who's only half naked. Brand. Now, Brand is another one of those characters who has had kind of a troubled history in League of Legends, because he started out as, oh, there's a fire spirit who does fire things, and then the summoners captured him, and now he does fire things in League of Legends instead, and he wants to burn stuff because he's a pyromaniac. And that was kind of the extent of, like, that was kind of it for what Brand was and what he did and what he was about. More recently, they've given him a much more interesting retcon and rework in the lore, making him Ryze's old apprentice. Ryze's apprentice, who was taken over by one of the world runes and became this horrifying fire monstrosity dude, and who's traveling around trying to find more world runes and do some apocalyptic murder the world stuff to the world, because world runes, because something power corrupts, etc. And his lore is actually quite good now. Like, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on with him, where he's like this mage from the Freljord who gets taken under Ryze's wing, and they travel around the world, and they have this mentor-mentee relationship, kind of Anakin and Obi-Wan-ish kind of thing going on. And then he turns Vader and starts to burn things and gets about as charred as Vader does. But the character design is like, what's with the leather straps on the pants? Like, because I can see the idea of him just being a charred man, like, just being, like, essentially turned into coal by the fire that burns inside him. And I understand why then you wouldn't want to, like, have a lot of Freljord influences on the character model itself. But then there's the pants, which are like, why are there leather are these straight jacket pants? Because if they're from a straight jacket, I don't know how you would tie... I don't know. He's nondescript. Like, he doesn't really... He's kind of a cool character design, and I can see some narrative justifications for making him the way that he is, but he also doesn't look like anything. And as people are pointing out in chat right now, Brand should be naked. Yeah, I tend to agree, actually. I think he would be a stronger character design if you just took his goddamn pants off and removed the question of, first of all, why don't his pants burn? Like, why don't the pants burn? That's weird. Are they asbestos? Even if they are, they should probably melt at some point, shouldn't they? And it also removes the question of, like, what culture was he from that they put belts on their legs for some reason? I don't know. And that's where I'll just make him, like, naked and maybe carve some more interesting designs into him. Like, they've got this tattoo design on his head, this spiral thing. Just do way more of that. And, like, way more of, like, fire practically bursting out of his skin and making this real charred golem zombie thing. That would be cool. But as it stands, he's just kind of a... Like, there's something good about him, but it doesn't come through in the way that he's designed. At least not in my opinion. Good lord, you people really like his bulge in chat. Well, different strokes for different folks, I suppose. Which leads us on to Brahm. Ah, Brahm, hero of Freljord, friend to all, master of Porus. Ah, Brahm. Now, Brahm is a good example of the stuff that I was ranting about with Ashe. Remember, with Ashe, the trouble for me isn't that she's hot or that she's showing a bit of skin so much. The trouble is that the clothes she is wearing don't look like they're from the goddamn Freljord. Brahm, on the other hand, is, like, walking around topless in a blizzard, and we'll talk about that in a second, but the clothes that he is wearing, despite all the flesh that he's showing, still look like they're from the Freljord. Heavy metal plating, lots of leather straps, and fur all over the place. He looks like he is from the place that he's supposed to be from, unlike Ashe, which is the difference between them. Now, Brahm also has a different design aesthetic. Like, Ashe is the Frost Archer. She's the War Mother of the Aberrosans, but she's also, like, she's an AD carry. She's a marksman. She's squishy, she's fragile, and she's not supposed to be a close-ranged fighter. Like, she's supposed to be a long-range fighter because of the arrows and the bow and the whole thing. Her whole thing is kiting people and never letting them get close to her. Brahm is a different thing. Brahm's whole thing, at perfect timing on the music there, Brahm's whole thing is that he's impervious. He is hero of Freljord. Brahm is here. The heart is the strongest muscle. Sometimes icy heart just need one smile. That's Brahm's whole deal, is that he can take anything, he can protect everyone. His broad, manly chest is a safe place for you to rest your head and maybe give him a little bit of motorboating. I'm sure he wouldn't mind. That's his whole deal, is that he's impervious, powerful, strong, that he stands against things. That's not really part of Ashe's character at all, but Brahm is a tank. He's designed to look like he can withstand tremendous pain and punishment and cold. And Brahm's lore itself also ties into this, where he spreads fake stories about himself, like plays into the idea of his legend as this impervious, perfect man who cannot be harmed or hurt or defeated by anything. And so the idea that he's kind of putting on a show when he does this, not just a gun show, because good lord, he is putting on a gun show, but that he's also putting on a show for people to inspire them, to be like this inspirational, folkloric hero figure. Yeah, that's like, that creates the reasons why you would say, okay, maybe there's a reason for him to do something as stupid as run around the Freljord topless. Like, maybe there's a reason for it that kind of doesn't exist for Ashe. Anyway, outside of that, like, Brahm is just kind of a good character design for what he is. He's got this giant circus strongman aesthetic going on, which is where a lot of him is drawn from. He's drawn from the circus strongman, like the sideshow dude who bench presses children for fun for the audience, that kind of thing. I feel like his character model is maybe a little bit exaggerated on the muscles, but the giant circus mustache works really well for him. It gives him this kind of, like, it plays in well with his larger-than-life character. And you've got this giant belt, which is deep. Like, if he has the problem that other League of Legends champions have, that if he bends over, he's gonna stab himself in the sternum with, like, this spike at the top of his belt. Like, I don't know how he would ever bend forward, like, because he can't. There's this thing in the way. But all of it seems to be in the service of, like, this sort of circus aesthetic, which comes through in his animations as well, where, like, he'll spin his shield on his legs and do, like, circus acrobatics with it, which works very well for me. And so for me, Brahm is S tier. Theoretically, he's probably more of an A tier champion because, like, it's stuff we've seen before. But for me, he's S tier because I just like him. Brahm is good. Brahm is friend. Which leads us on to something that I'm going to be less laudable about. Remember how I used Ashe as a punching bag for like 10 minutes during the stream? Let's do that again. Yeah, let's talk about Kaitlyn. Kaitlyn is a steampunk cosplayer who went to the wrong convention. Kaitlyn is a bunch of generic tropes thrown together with a bunch of titty and some thigh, with no coherent aesthetic vision whatsoever, kind of airdropped into the game because they needed the hot-ass cosplayer to do the steampunk cosplay in the game, but not because there was any solid consideration for why a person might want to look like that. And she kind of has the Annie problem in that she's just really old, and they've never updated her to really fit with the modern state of the game. And so for me, she wavers somewhere between F tier with Ashe, which is kind of where I'm tempted to put her because, like, she's not quite as old as Annie, and uncategorizable with Annie, where it's like, Annie just has never had a full update of her character design since the game was released, like for 10 frickin' years ago. Kaitlyn, on the other hand, is more recent, and Kaitlyn is the sheriff of Piltover, okay? That's number one. She's a law enforcement official. She's someone who works for, like, the official police department of Piltover. She's a member of the aristocratic upper class of Piltover, and she's a detective. Look at her and tell me what part of her character design says sheriff to you. What part of her character design says detective? What part of her character design says anything other than hot lady sniper? None of it. None of it does. Because her character design is terrible for the lore that she's supposed to be a part of. She looks like a villain, not a policeman. Like, she doesn't look like a law enforcement professional. She looks like evil villain with Russian accent who snipes person from far away with gun. That's what she looks like. And it sucks. And it becomes a problem because it kind of fucks with her dynamic with Vi. Like, what I really love about Kaitlyn, some of the really good stuff that happens with Kaitlyn in the lore, is her dynamic with Vi, where Vi is this like rough and tumble punk girl who likes to punch things and break stuff, and Kaitlyn is this uptight, prissy, upper class lady who's, oh, well, surely I can't do anything of that sort, blah, blah, blah. And Vi taunting her by calling her Cupcake, like, that's all good, but that dynamic aesthetically, visually, only works if Kaitlyn actually provides the uptight, sort of self-obsessed, straight-laced counterpart to Vi's design. But if anything, Kaitlyn looks more wild than Vi does, because she's got this, like, with the titty out and the tube top and the kinky leather straps around her legs, she looks more like a stripper. Like, she looks more like a stripper, which is fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a champion that looks like a stripper. We'll talk about Evelyn later. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a super hot sniper lady in the game. It's just not what her lore is designed to express at all. So yeah, I'm putting Kaitlyn in F tier, partly because I'm salty that, like, the great character dynamic that she could have with Vi is ruined by this. There's a million fantastic Kaitlyn redesigns out there. I encourage you to go and look at any of them. Thomas Randby, Fairy Fountain, who's actually currently an artist at Riot, did a bunch of them that are actually really, really nice and do a lot, like, to keep some of the... I like character updates that keep the purple aesthetic, that, like, keeps a lot of what's cool about Kaitlyn before, like the top hat, for example, but updates it to make it look like she's vaguely like an actual fucking sheriff from somewhere. Which leads us on to Camille, who... Thighs. Which leads us on to Camille, who actually does a lot of what I would like to see Kaitlyn do a little bit more, because she has that, like, buttoned up, uptight, like, completely locked down aesthetic, at least... like, in the upper half. We'll talk about the legs in a second. Like, where you can see that she's meant to be an uptight character. She's meant to be someone who's obsessed with rules and order and, like, keeping things the way that they're supposed to be. So, Little Miss Knife Legs here. It's like, you can't talk about it without talking about that humongous badonkadonk, like that giant ass, that huge booty. You can't. Like, the whole character design is based around those legs and the shape that it gives to her body. There's no way around it. So yes, she has thick thighs. She has a very thin waist. Like, wow, I don't know how there's room for any organs in there, but she has thick thighs. Let's get it out of our system. Big fat booty, thighs, MILF, etc. Get it out of our system. And let's talk about some of the problems with her character design after that. Yeah, just get it out of your system, chat. Just get it out of your system. There we go. Step on me and stab on me, queen. Yes, that is pretty much... that's pretty much the whole thing about it. So, Camille, according to her lore, she is like something like 120 years old or 80. Like, she's old. She's supposed to be a very old lady who has had parts of her body replaced with, well, hex tech, basically. Replaced with mechanical systems and hex tech that allow her to do her duty, but in one of the truly cowardly moves on behalf of the Riot lore writers and character designers, also, they had to put in this little thing of like, oh yeah, she had part of her body replaced with hex tech, and that means she doesn't get old anymore. Which is something that bothers me, because I was really excited for League of Legends to finally have an actual legit old woman as a champion, but then we get to the actual thing, and... oh, hang on. And it's like... come on. How the hell do I... there. And it's like, she doesn't look old, though, does she? She doesn't look old at all. She has white hair, that's it. She doesn't look like she's an old woman. And being an old woman is actually kind of important for Camille, because she's supposed to represent the stuffy, self-obsessed, sort of not matriarchal, but she's supposed to represent a stuffy upper-crust matriarch, like ruling her family with an iron fist and bringing down sharp justice on anyone who dares to question the social order. That's her whole thing, is she is the enforcer for the nobility of Piltover. And so what I would have liked is like a Minerva McGonagall kind of figure. Someone who's like visibly old, but who's also like, yes, still agile, still powerful, still capable of like running up a wall and cutting off your head with a swipe of her left leg, but who is also visibly stodgy and old and a representation of old, entrenched power structures. Like, age is the perfect way to represent that, so having this cop-out thing where it's like, oh, yeah, she's old, but she's got, I don't know, blah, blah, magic, hextech, something, which means that we can still make her look super fuckable. Which is like, really? Really? She needed to be fuckable as... Okay, fine. Fine, but it weakens the design for me. Now, I do like the form factor of her. Not just because I do like me a big booty, but the whole, like, making her waist wasp thin. I would have liked to have her wear a corset, like a visible corset, to really justify it, but making her waist really, really thin and slender and kind of fragile looking, and then contrasting it with these, like, huge, bulging legs, it helps emphasize that her power is in her legs, like that it's the knife legs that give her combat abilities that make her dangerous. But it also just creates a nice accentuation and like a nice shape language to her, and like hourglass figures are appealing. I don't really mind it so much. I don't think it's a bad thing that she has a thick booty. They were supposed to make her actually old and they didn't, and I'll never stop being salty about that, for which reason Camille should probably be higher. But I'm gonna put her in an A tier, because like there's like 90% of a really great character design there, and then there's that little cowardly, oh, but let's make her fuckable though thing that is so unnecessary, and which bothers me specifically. If it doesn't bother you, that's fine, but it bothers me specifically, and this is my list, so I do what I want. Yet the most popular champions are the most sexualized. That's not true, actually, Biltwater Boy. That's not true at all. The most popular champions are the champions that are most powerful in the meta at any given time, and then some characters that are fan favorites. They're not necessarily popular because they're hot. Like, that's part of it. I'm gonna do a video about that someday, but it's not quite true that anytime you make a sexy champion, that means they get popular. As indeed you'll see from, like, a lot of the sexy champions who just don't get played that much. When did you last see, like, a Janna in a high-tier game? How many people are playing Misfortune right now? I don't know the meta. I don't know who's playing what right now, but lots of hot ladies don't get played at all, so that's not really what it's about, and Lux tends to be popular no matter what the fuck, and she's not a especially sexualized character. Anyway, moving on to Cassiopeia. So Cassiopeia is a kind of an interesting melange of weird and disparate things in League of Legends, because she's a Naga, first of all, in the sense that she's a half-human, half-snake person. Like, that's the first part of her character design, is that she's got this Naga thing going on, which is something that's, I believe, is mainly inspired from Asian subcontinent folklore. Like, it's more like Indian folklore that the Naga are from, but then she's also Medusa. Now, the Medusa and the Naga have been conflated in culture for a very long time now. They've sort of been merged into the same thing, even though with Medusa, she has snakes for hair, but there's never any mention in any of the myths of her having, like, a snake lower body. She's a Gorgon, but there's no mention, to the best of my knowledge, in the mythology about Gorgons having snake bodies. They have horrifying bodies. They're so horrible to look at that they will turn a man to stone by, like, the mere sight of their ugliness. But that's not really the case for our modern interpretations of Nagas and Gorgons now, is it? Because Cassiopeia is hot-ass snake titty, big titty, snake titty, lady snitty. Snitties, is what I'm trying to say. And I feel mixed about this on some level, because Cassiopeia's original lore actually incorporates the whole thing about spoiled beauty. Actually incorporates the whole thing about being turned into a hideous monster. Like, there's been a few versions of her lore, but the way it goes, basically, is that she does some stupid stuff in Shurima, gets herself super cursed, and she goes from being a legendarily powerful beauty, like someone who could charm a man with a mere waggle of her eyebrows and turn anyone to putty in her hands, like with her vile femdom charms and etc. She goes from that to being cursed by this Shuriman artifact and turned into this horrifying monster who's terrible to look at. But it's like, you look at her and it's like, really? Like, people get turned off. Like, she's still hot, though. Like, she's still obviously hot. She's not horrifying. She's got sharp teeth and a snake body, but she's still obviously hot. And that's kind of like, oh, yes, oh, poor you being cursed with this horrible sexiness. where the character design kind of lets her down in that sense, because her whole story now is about the ways in which being cursed, the ways in which being turned into this horrifying monster has changed her perspective, has changed her behavior. She was actually cast for a while as something of a vigilante almost, like enacting revenge against shitty men who abuse women because she has some grudges about that stuff. Where, like, that kind of works, but in terms of like, being a Gorgon, I don't know. And she has the problem of genericness, in that she is just kind of a generic Gorgon. Like, she's just like a Naga Gorgon hybrid that load up Heroes of Might and Magic 3, and you'll see, like, a bunch of Medusa enemies exactly like her. There's nothing really unique about her, and she doesn't have a lore character design interaction that's interesting enough for me to really feel like there's something good to go there. Anyway, Max Kane has sent me a super chat that I missed when it actually came along. Hey man, properly graduated today. Congratulations! I'm glad you were able to graduate despite everything. It's nice to have some pleasant nerd ramblings to relax with. Kind of off topic, have you seen Epithet Erased? I don't know what that is, so no, I haven't seen it. And Cellar the non-gamer, oh, there's a non-gamer in the chat. Please be nice to him. Would you make a vid with redesigns for champions? I don't know. Maybe, eventually. I don't know how to answer, would you ever make a video about X? Because, yeah, sure, I'll make a video about anything, but I don't know if I will. Like, I wouldn't mind, but... So, let me just get a drink. My voice is starting to feel it. Cho'Gath. He is the Violator from Spawn. Actually, let me find the Violator. He's this guy. He is the Violator from Spawn. Like, literally the not even a little bit. He's the Violator from Spawn. And they made him purple and gave him an extra set of arms, but he is the Violator from Spawn. And he has the problem of being old that we've talked about multiple times before. He's just a really old character design, and theoretically I could be charitable and say that he's uncategorizable because he was designed long before anyone really knew what the fuck the Void was supposed to be about. He was designed long before, like, there was a real Void aesthetic to draw from, but he's just the fucking Violator. Like, it's the thing of, like, him being such a blatant ripoff. Like, blatant ripoff. Where it's just like, no. Do better, League of Legends. Do way better. Because that's just like... I don't have a lot of love lost for Spawn, especially because of Todd McFarlane's asshole. But no, you can't just put the Violator in your video game. And they're like, no. Absolutely not. No. Anyway, outside of that, Cho'Gath doesn't look like a Void monster either. Like, he looks vaguely kinda-ish like a Void monster a little bit since his texture update. But no, he doesn't look like a Void monster. When we look at the other Void monsters that are in the game and we look at how the Void is being conceptualized in the lore, Cho'Gath looks fuck all like that. And that also counts against him. So here's one that immediately goes into the uncategorizable bin. Poor Corki. Corki is another one of the very, very, like, many champions we mentioned before. Very, very old champion. And he was put into the game, like, before Riot knew what the fuck Yordles were supposed to be. And in fact, I'm not 100% convinced that they know what the fuck Yordles are supposed to be nowadays. But Corki is like, he shoots down a Zeppelin and he rides in whatever the fuck this thing is. And he's got a mustache and he's clearly just a tiny human. Like, he's obviously just a tiny human, but the reason for that is because at the time, Riot didn't, like, they didn't know what the fuck to do with Yordles. Like, I think he was a Megling, maybe, originally, or something along those lines. I don't know what the hell to do with him. Like, I wouldn't know how to criticize him, really, because he's just a fucking mess. Like, he's a pile of hot garbage. Like, he's got these tiny little propellers that make no sense whatsoever from any kind of aerodynamic perspective. His thing doesn't look like an airplane. It looks like, I don't know what the fuck it looks like. It's a bunch of scrap metal barely welded together. He's a gnome from Warcraft. Like, he's a World of Warcraft gnome that they called a Yordle and put in the game. But it's like, I don't know how to even begin to critique it because, like, So he goes in uncategorizable because I don't fucking want to deal with that. He's Gyrocopter from Dota. Yeah, I mean, pretty much. He's even worse than Ashe in that respect. Which leads us on to Mr. Darius himself. Now, Darius has one of the more interesting production histories when it comes to League of Legends because he's from the before times, when we still had this dichotomy where Demacia was the good fantasy kingdom and Noxus was the evil fantasy kingdom. And that came across in their character designs a lot, where Garen is the traditional upstanding hero who wields a sword and wears blue and gold and is a Demacia. Oh yes, knightly kingdom, pride, goodness, honor, blah blah, whatever. And then Darius is the typical fantasy villain, the antagonist who has got spikes on his pauldrons, and he wears red, and he's got a big battle axe, and he looks like he's got scars, and rah, 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 Darius, blah, 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 Noxus, blah, blah, pride, honor, kill, blah, blah. That's what he's from. Like, that's where Darius kind of started out. And I can see that people in the chat are extremely horny for him, which is valid. I support you in your horniness. I support you fully. Like, just be horny for these characters. Like, it's not like Riot is ever going to give you any queer content, so you might as well make them all gay. But what's interesting about Darius is that as Noxus was being redefined, like, as Riot began to develop Noxus into more of an interesting region rather than just evil fantasy kingdom, generic evil fantasy kingdom, Darius became kind of the litmus test, like kind of the starting point for the aesthetic development of Noxus. And you can see that especially in his battle axe, which serves as the inspiration for the Noxian emblem. And they kind of based the whole region, essentially. What do you mean no queer content? Nico and Diana and Leona exist. You name me one piece of lore, one short story, one animated short, one anything that has any actual queer content in it, and the Varys comic is like it. But they don't even fucking kiss in it. So no, I don't know. Diana and Leona have never been confirmed to be queer. They should be, but they've never been. And Nico is like, oh yeah, she's into girls. Like, they confirmed it on Twitter. Like, they said on Twitter, oh yeah, she's technically LGBT. And then they never... Anyway, that's a rant for another time. Darius, anyway, he became the litmus, like the holotype that Noxus's aesthetics were developed around. And what's interesting about that is that where Darius began life as a rather generic fantasy villain guy, because Noxus has been built up so successfully around his aesthetic, around his visual conceits, around the way that he's designed, his character design has become really, really well integrated into League of Legends over time. He's become really, really well represented and well reflective of his region over time. So I might have put him in like a C tier back in the day, but because Noxus complements him so perfectly, even though he is kind of a generic character, it's like, I couldn't think of a way to improve him, really. Like, what would I do that would make him better? I don't know. He fits Noxus perfectly. And so, I feel like he belongs in A tier, because, like, yeah, there's problems, but I wouldn't know how to change him. Like, I genuinely wouldn't know how to change him. So let's talk about lesbians. Let's talk about the moon. Now, Diana and Leona, some of you may know this. Diana and Leona were originally intended to be star-crossed lovers. Star-crossed in the sense of, like, if they weren't on opposite sides of this terrible conflict, Romeo and Juliet kind of thing, they would probably be girlfriends. Unfortunately, Riot's upper management, the culture at Riot at the time, never allowed people to make those connections explicit. Now, I've talked to some of the writers for Leona and Diana who've said that they fought internally, like they wanted to. This was their artistic vision for the character. They wanted to confirm that Leona and Diana were lovers, like bitter ex-girlfriends split apart by circumstance, but they were never allowed to. They were censored, basically. Which is one of the great, like, just really fucking rankles me the wrong way to see Riot, like, every Pride Month, oh, we've got a rainbow avatar, we care so much, but then you look into the production history of what happens internally at Riot, and it's like, ah, he's gay. No, we can't make them gay or queer in any way at all. You can't say that out loud, you can't say it publicly. No, absolutely not. Over and over and over again, they suppress this shit. Anyway, that's a rant for another time. Diana herself. Let's talk about the actual let's talk about the actual character design and not about Riot's fucking cowardly failure to... she's like fine. Is like she's one of those characters, like she became the template from which the Lunari as an order, as a part of Targon lore, was kind of defined from. But as a character design herself, outside of the really cool forehead moon tattoo and the really cool sword, is like, I wouldn't know how to describe her aesthetic or her outfit. Is like, she's got blue bodysuit with something? Shoulder pauldron thing? Like, the moon iconography just isn't incorporated. Oh, the people in chat saying, oh, it's because of censorship from China and Russia? Yeah, partly. But more than that, it's because of censorship from the United States. Just saying, like, that still happens in the US as well. It's not just Russia and China, it's also domestic. She isn't, like, she's so indistinct as a character design, which is my major problem with her. She doesn't really have like a striking color profile, like the silver of the moon or the blue, which is what you see with, let's go back to Ophelios. Like, Ophelios has a distinctive color scheme. He's got like the teal and the purple, and then like the black of the night sky, and he's got like the Shuriman gold stuff thing. Like, there's a consistent, clear color scheme with the silver moon, weapons and things. Like, you can see that he belongs to an aesthetic tradition. Then you skip backwards to Diana, who was the first Lunari, and is like, there's some purple there, kinda. There's some silver there, kinda. There's some teal there, kinda. But it's like, And so, I love my moon lesbian. Like, she's lovely, but she's not a great character design, I don't think. Hedge Knight, the ESRB gives higher age ratings to queer content. Yes, exactly. The ESRB, like, if you have a gay kiss in your video game, you're gonna get a higher content rating than if you have, like dudes blowing each other's brains out with chainsaw rifles in Gears of War. Just saying, that's a thing that happens. Beckheck sent me a super chat as well. I learned so much from your rants. Keep doing you. I bloody well will. I don't have any choice at this point. It's become my career, weirdly. Anyway, Diana, I love my moon lesbian, but not a great character design. There's really nothing there to kind of attach to. And that leads us on to, let me see if I can pronounce this weird name correctly. Draven. Draven is the brother of Darius. He's the glorious executioner of Noxus. And I feel a little conflicted about him in some ways, as I do with many champions. You've heard me say this a million times already. So Draven, in terms of having just sheer personality, is kind of an A-tier champion. Like, he's got that fucking mustache. He's got, like, the whole smiley, I'm Draven! Like, he's both a mean character and kind of seriously cool in a lot of ways. But then I look at his character design, and it's like, there's this peculiar mix of both. He's got these leather strap, this weird vest thing that he wears with a big fur collar that's kind of outrageous and out there. But then his colors are like this really muted dark red that doesn't really look like blood. It just looks dusty. And then this teal, like this cold color, this cold greenish blue color that indicates tranquility. Like, the color language of Draven just doesn't... Where's the showmanship? Like, where's the, I'm a circus performer, like, who riles up the crowd? Like, where's all... He should be gaudy. He should be bright and colorful. He should be a peacock. Like, he should be more extravagant than this. I look at his outfit design, and I just don't get that sense from it at all. And there's so much good about Draven. I love his stupid-ass hairstyle. I love his idiotic mustache. I love his over-the-top scars, which I'm sure he touches up with makeup. I love the giant axes that he spins around. But there's something about the color profile of this character that just is so fundamentally at odds with how over-the-top he is. Like, he should be wearing, like, bright red and purple and, like, pink. Fucking pink. Draven would rock the pink. He should be wearing something eye-catching and gaudy and over-the-top and deeply excessive, rather than this sort of, like, halfway between a BDSM gear and like a rain poncho. I don't know. He should be a wrestler. Like, he's a wrestler. He should be, like, there should be more God in it. The giant fucking, give him a mask or something. Anything. And so rather than being A tier, I have to move him down to B tier, because, like, there's a lot of good there, but the color choices just frustrate me. Frustrate me. Oh my god, here comes Draven with a steel chair out of nowhere! Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that is Mundo. Oh, good lord. Yeah. I'm gonna be kind to him and put him in uncategorizable. I want him in F tier, but I'm gonna be kind and put him in uncategorizable, because Mundo, I don't know what the fuck to say about him. He's the Hulk, but he's also Frankenstein's monster, but he's also Mr. Hyde. Except he's none of those things, because the Hulk and Frankenstein's monster and Mr. Hyde are defined by, like, anger and, like, this hulking out rage that is uncontainable power. And then Dr. Mundo is like, I've got a cleaver, and I'm a scientist, but also not a scientist, and I'm stupid, but I'm also smart. And he's a joke. Like, Dr. Mundo is a joke. He was designed as a joke. He's played as a joke. Mundo goes where he pleases. Mundo! Da, 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 da. Like, even his fucking voice. He's a cartoon character, and he's not a very good one. He's supposed to be this sadist, masochistic guy, like, who gets off on pain, who feels pain as pleasure, rather, like, who inflicts pain on others because he has this weird psychotic belief that he's doing good. But none of that is, like, no. He's just a bad cartoon character. And I'm gonna be generous and say it's because he's a really old character and they've never ever updated him, but he's just bad. Like, he's just like, even from that perspective, he's still, fuck it, he's an F tier. He's bad. Even for the standards of League of Legends 10 years ago, he's bad. He just sucks. He's terrible. You know what's not terrible, though? My boy, Echo. Oh, Echo is good. Echo has the best short story in all of League of Legends. Let me see if I can find it for you, actually. Because we'll just take a quick look at it. Let's see. There's the champion page. Go into the biography, and then we go to the thing. And then we read his story. It's a story called Lullaby. And essentially, it's a story of, like, Echo's parents have gathered enough money to send him to Piltover to go to a science academy so he can apply himself and, like, really have a chance at a career and a life that they never had a chance at. They're poor, they live in the slums, they're sick, like, they're dying from overwork and distress. And Echo doesn't want to go. He doesn't want to leave them. He doesn't want to go to Piltover. He wants to stay in Son because despite everything, he loves his city and he wants to use his talents to help the people of Son, to make the city a better place to be. And he doesn't want to leave his parents behind. And so when his parents surprise him with a birthday cupcake, essentially, like a little cake just for him for his birthday, Echo uses his time powers to rewind time over and over again so he can experience that happy moment with his parents before he has to tell them that he's not going to Piltover, that he's not going to, like, essentially go try and live that better life that they worked so hard to give him, so that he can just have that moment of happiness just a little bit longer. It's fucking heartbreaking, and it's so good! And it's such a good conceptualization of the character himself. Like, that's using time powers to do some really fucking interesting stuff from a narrative perspective, because yeah, if you are a kid who loves your parents very much, but you have to tell them something that's gonna hurt them, it's gonna be difficult, yeah, you would do that, wouldn't you? Like, you would use your time powers like that. That's I maintain that that's the best piece of lore that League of Legends has ever published, because it breaks my heart every time. So that's really good. That doesn't have a lot to do with his character design, but that's why I like Echo so much as a character, is because there is that deeply emotional core right at the center of him, where he's just a kid who cares a lot about his friends and his family. He's just a really good kid, you know? Anyway, Draco Kraken, thank you for those $10. You didn't leave a message, so I don't know if you were trying to say anything. Anyway, in terms of character design, a couple of things. He's got that punk aesthetic going on, like with the mohawk. That's the most obvious thing. I love the face paint of the hourglass on his face. Like, he's literally got time on his face. Like, that's a cool way to show that he's got this. Like, he lives in the punky parts of Son. There's a reason to self-decorate, but also indicating the whole relationship time with he has. I don't know about his weapon. I've never really... It's sort of the halfway point between a sword and a baseball bat that I've never kind of, like, I would rather they just committed to the baseball bat fully, because, again, that would tie in really well to this sort of, like, street punk aesthetic thing that he's got going on. I love his overalls. Like, I love that he's got the goggles and the overalls and the tool belt, all of which indicates him, like, being an inventor, being someone who works with his hands and works in a workshop and tries to figure stuff out and make better things. I like the design of the C drive, which we can't see here, the Z drive, the time thing, because it kind of looked cobbled together. Even as it looks powerful and advanced, it also looks like it's something that he kind of put together himself. He's got a nice color aesthetic as well. I like the contrast between, like, the bright red of his scarf with, like the dark chocolate of the skin, and then, like, the green, gray aesthetic of the pants. He's a very simple design. Like, he's not very overwrought. He's just like a kid in overalls with some, like, shin protectors and some shoes, and he has this kind of modern streetwear aesthetic-y kind of vibe, almost-ish, that just works really well. And I wouldn't say that his lore is super well expressed in his character design, but it doesn't need to. Like, the simplicity works in his favor, because he's a simple kid. Like, he just loves his friends and his city and his parents, you know? So Echo's good. I want to put him in S tier, but you know what? I want to put him in S tier, so I fucking will. This is my list. I can do whatever the fuck I want. He's an S tier. Let's talk about spider titties. Hello, Elise. So, some of you may know, I'm sure someone will bring it up in chat, that a channel called, what are they called? Sequentially? Subjectively did a full redesign of Elise a little while back, where they kind of accidentally turned her Ionian. Which, you know, so if people want to bring that up in chat, yes, I know about it. I'm not going to bring it up for the purposes of this. But anyway, Elise. So, again, some mixed feelings here, because I don't actually think it's a bad thing that Elise has giant titties. I don't think it's a bad thing that she's got the bare midriff and the whole seductress thing going on. I don't think that's a bad thing at all, because that's very much, like, Elise is the Black Widow. Like, like, she's the spider that lures you into her nest with promises of sensual pleasure, and then she kills and eats you. That's what she is. Like, that's her whole character is about being this seductress who tempts and charms people into following her into the spider's lair, where then she sacrifices them to, either to, what's his name, Vilemaw, or she eats them herself, because that's the kind of character that she is. The only thing really with Elise, I would make her even more over-sexualized. Like, that's, like, if you want to have her be the sexualized character, go harder. Like, give her, like, an even larger booty, give her even larger titties, make her even, like, more seductive and sexy. I would go harder on that. Or you could go the other way and take away the sexualization and make her a charismatic seductress instead. Which is the other thing of, like, rather than having her be a seductress with her physical sensuality, have her be a seductress with her personality, with her voice, with her, like, as I said, with her charisma. That would require a complete redesign of the character. So with the character as she is, I would just lean into it, like, make her even hotter. Like, just fucking go for it, rather than be restrained at all. The one problem there is, though, is that Elise in her human form versus her spider form. That's the big problem for me, is like, yeah, I'm completely on board with the idea of her being like a Black Widow seductress, like just being hot as fuck. But, like, she's got spider legs coming out of her fucking back, though. Like, oh yeah, seductress, except obviously she's a fucking Black Widow spike. She's got spikes on her feet and on her knees, and those things, I don't even know what those are. They are spiky, and she's got spiky spider legs coming out of her back. And that's the major problem that I have with Elise is that in order for that to really, really work, the thing of like, oh, she looks so gorgeous and beautiful and she wants you. Oh, she wants you. She wants you so bad. Just come a little closer. And then, bam, all of a sudden there's a giant spider eating your face. That requires a greater contrast between the beauty and the beast, right? Like, she should look like a beautiful, gorgeous, hot woman, maybe with like a red and black dress with lots of cleavage or something. She should look like an actual person who's not necessarily gonna murder you, not like a monster. And that's the major problem I have with Elise, is like, they kind of wanted to make her the seductress, but then they also wanted to make her a monster girl, and those two don't work together at all. Because all of this nonsense makes it obvious that she's gonna fucking kill and eat you. Like, who's dumb enough to fall for it? Which is like my major problem with it, which is why I put her in a C tier, is like, if Elise's human form was just like less fucking obvious, I would be happy to put her in like an A tier or a B tier. B tier because Black Widows are kind of overplayed and a little bit boring, but because of just the stupid obviousness that, yes, obviously she's gonna kill and eat you, you fucking moron. Like, why would you ever fall for this? That kind of takes away from it for me. But I don't mind her being hot. Like, I don't mind her being big titty spider lady. That works for me. But it's the, like, really, someone falls for that? Well, then they're stupid and they deserve to die. Speaking of hot ladies, though, oh, my girl Evelyn. I like Evelyn a lot. And not just for the obvious reasons. Not just because... God, she's hot. Not just because of that, but also because she's an application of something that I have wanted from League of Legends for so fucking long. Like, Ashe has her titties out for no fucking reason. Syndra has her titties out for no fucking reason. Kaitlyn has her titties out for no fucking... Like, they're sexy, but there's no reason for it. There's no point to it. It doesn't do anything for their character. It doesn't inform their personality or their story. It doesn't inform their themes or the ideas behind their character designs. It does nothing for them. It's pointless sexiness, completely pointless and useless. Evelyn is the example of how you do that right. Evelyn is super fucking hot because she's a seductress demon who seduces you and then feasts on your masochistic pain as she straddles you up top with a coquettish little pout on her lips like she's a fucking, like, a schoolgirl in some 1970s porn movie while she stabs you to death and feasts on your pain. She's sexy for such a good fucking reason, and it's so well executed. Like, this is not the best shot of her character model, but in-game also, like, the raw sensuality and sexual seduction coming off her works gangbusters. And so for me, Evelyn is S tier. Like, this is how you're supposed to do it. Like, if you're gonna make the sexy, generic titty babe fantasy lady character, this is how you make that design work for you. This is how you make that shit work for you. Have a character for whom this presentation makes sense, where it speaks to her themes. Like, because Evelyn takes this form not because she gives a shit about being hot. She's a demon. She doesn't care. She only cares about absorbing pain from humans. She takes this form entirely because this pandering nonsense, these giant titties, that fat ass, those thighs, all of that seduces humans. That's the only reason why she like, her entire character design is about pandering to your lowest, basest instincts. That's the whole idea. And that works really well. Like, this is how you do that right. I get a little annoyed sometimes when people accuse me of just being a prude, like, oh, you just don't like sexy ladies, you just want everyone to be covered up and blah, blah, Victorian, blah, blah, blah. Fuck you! Evelyn is fucking amazing. It's when that shit is done badly that I get upset and annoyed. Anyway, step on me, mommy. Let's talk about something a little less hot. I'm gonna need to pause the video and leave the room. Yeah, sorry, Eric. Give my queen S tier or so help me. I hope you were talking about Evelyn, because that's what it's the hour hand of a clock tower. I don't know what you're referring to there, Hedge Knight. Hey, Sky, how you doing? Oh, I'm having a lot of fun looking at hot fantasy titties. And also other stuff as well. Say hello to Captain Fuckboy, Mr. E-Boy of League of Legends himself. The twink in charge, Ezreal. So Ezreal is one of those champions who's like... He's become so iconic to League of Legends, and he was League of Legends' like original pretty boy. He was like the first time that they really leaned into this idea of like a twinky little handsome anime pretty boy who was supposed to appeal more to a female audience. Like he was supposed to be designed more for their aesthetic pleasure, rather than, like most of the titty babes in the game, being designed for the presumed male gaze, which is a term that has a lot of problems, but is useful in this context. Oh, Echo's weapon is part of a clock tower. Okay, yeah. Yo, I can see that, Hedge Knight. That's like, yeah, kinda. Yeah, I would have some concerns about... We've moved on from Echo. So, Ezreal is like... Again, I have this mixed feeling. He's a character who's kind of gotten better over time, not just because he got the rework, but also because Piltover has changed around him a lot over the time. Yeah, Rito thinks he appeals to straight women. Yeah, Rito thinks he appeals to straight women. He does. Like, there's lots of straight women who want to kiss Ezreal, but there's also a lot of boys who want to kiss Ezreal. Where was it? Right, Ezreal, like... He has this Indiana Jones, like he's got jeans and a t-shirt and a leather coat. Like he's got this very contemporary look. Like he looks very modern and not really like he's from a fantasy story at all as such. And that used to be kind of a major mark against him in my book. But Piltover has changed around him a lot as well. Piltover itself has updated to have a much more modern contemporary aesthetic. That kind of fits better with the character over time. So I've kind of mellowed on him a little bit. I used to feel kind of like, really? Like, you didn't want to give him any interesting fantasy details at all, Riot? Just a dude in a fucking leather, like some fuckboy who's walking down the street right now somewhere. But with Piltover itself switching its aesthetic to better accommodate him, I've mellowed out on it, and I really do like the design of his glove, like this Shuriman power glove that he's got going on there, because there's two clever things about it. First of all, it's bright gold, and it sits on this big bulky thing that sits on the end of his arm, which draws attention to it, which tells you, okay, he's got the power in his arm to do the shooty magic blah blah bang bang, but also because the aesthetics of the glove are really badly matched with the rest of him. Yeah, you can tell that the glove is not something like... This fuckboy with his leather jacket and his t-shirt and stuff, this glove is not like a fashion statement for him. It's not something that he would choose out of his own personal aesthetics. He's got this glove because he stole it from an ancient civilization. He's a grave robber, by the way. Let's just keep that in mind with Ezreal. He's a grave robber. He robs graves. He steals their shit. Oh, wasn't the gauntlets actually Ishtalish? Maybe, I don't know. Either way, it has a Shuriman aesthetic, because Shuriman and Ishtal used to be the same country. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But it stands out from him. Like, it's clearly different from the rest of him, which is, like, just basically good character design. Like, to do that, like, to draw attention to the fact that the glove doesn't quite belong to him. Anyway, for me, he's B tier. Now, Fiddlesticks, he's S tier. Let's just get him up there immediately. Fiddlesticks used to be uncategorizable. That's what you'll see if you look at the old version, the 2019 version of this video, or this stream rather. Fiddlesticks was uncategorizable because he was one of those really old champions that just didn't make any fucking goddamn sense in the modern state of League of Legends anymore. And so I kind of didn't even really want to level a critique at him because he was just old and generic and weak and wasn't a great character design. New Fiddlesticks, on the other hand, haunts my motherfucking nightmares. New Fiddlesticks is very, very good. And I have nitpicks about him. Like, I do have nitpicks about him. Like, I wish he looked a little bit more like an actual Scarecrow. Like, just a little bit. Like, because he kind of has this robotic look almost with, like, the metal legs and things and stuff like that. But what I really fucking like about Fiddlesticks is that the lore conceit that they found for him is that the demon, like, the body, all of this is not Fiddlesticks. This is just a puppet, a cloth puppet that the demon, the thing that resides inside the metal cage at the core of the beast here, that the demon has put together, has basically just kind of grabbed a bunch of random stuff that was lying around and vaguely fashioned it together into some kind of horrifying monstrosity that it can pilot around. And Fiddlesticks especially, like his fucking animations, man. The way that he's animated is just so fucking good. And normally I wouldn't consider animation as part of the character design as such, but here it kind of has to be, because when Fiddlesticks moves, it's like he doesn't walk on two legs unless that's, like, he just kind of, if he wants to get somewhere, he'll just throw his arm forward and kind of shamble like this miserable monstrosity with extra limbs just kind of bursting out of him left and right. And it works so well. He's so fucking scary. He's terrifying. And the voice work, of course, obviously is absolutely amazing on Phil's like, Fiddlesticks. Like, oh, the voice work is good, and the effects that it got, he's like, he's good. I have nitpicks, but holy shit, 2,000 people. That's a lot. But Fiddlesticks is good. He's great, he's excellent. I don't know if I need to explain that much more, but Fiddlesticks is just good. Let's talk about Fiora. I have a salty history with Fiora. Oh, there was some super chat. Let me actually... the girls want to kiss Ezreal's, the boys want to do something else to Ezreal. Yeah, they do. Old Fiddle was a spirit of Halloween decoration. Yeah, pretty much. Recurring Extra says, have mercy on Skarner, he just misses his kind. Yeah, he does. I have a salty history with Fiora a little bit, because when she first came out, she looked a little bit different. And I haven't been able to find that version of the splash art before they made the changes. But basically, oh wait, no, here it is. Is it? No, that's not the one. Anyway, when the Fiora rework was first announced, when it was first revealed, some members of the League of Legends community had themselves a little bit of a hissy fit because she wasn't hot enough. She wasn't pretty enough for them. And so Riot went back and, like, cowards responding to feedback like cowards, they changed her and made her look hotter and, like, less distinctive and interesting. And that's my bias. Like, my bias as a person is, like, I don't care about pretty. I want interesting. I like characters better where they're not, like, generically pretty. But yeah, fair enough, fine. She's a fencer. She's the master duelist of Demacia. And in that respect, I feel mixed about her. Because, like, what's the thing? I don't know what to make of her character design. I don't know what to make of her. Like, I don't know what to make of those long pants with the gold stripe on them. This tunic thing? Like, the only thing about her that really makes sense to me as a fencer's outfit is the shoulder guard. Because, like, that's a thing that you have in fencing. But she has the shoulder guard on the wrong side. It's supposed to be facing your opponent when you're doing the fencing. So, and she doesn't look that Demacian to me either. Which is partly because she was updated at a time before Demacia's, like, stark black and white steel aesthetic was kind of really formalized and solidified, but she's not bad. But she has that Diana problem where it's like, yeah, she's got a cape. I don't know what to say about her. Like, she's just not very distinctive or interesting. And also, she's a fencer. Like, why? She should have, like, a set of core muscles. Those are incredibly important for fencing. Have you seen fencers when they're naked? Like, there's pictures on the internet. You can find them. Olympic fencers don't have bodies that look like this. Now, there is a couple of good things about her. Like, a couple of clever moves. The long golden stripe on her legs emphasizes the length of her legs and gives her this really long, lanky profile. I think, in fact, they made her legs a little bit longer than they should be, which is the Bayonetta trick, which emphasizes her femininity, which emphasizes, like, also her, like, dignity and grace as a character. There's a bunch of good stuff there, kinda, but she's so generic. Like, I don't, she's not bad. There's just nothing to say about her. She's just not interesting. Speaking of interesting, Let's talk about Fizz. Fizz is a Yordle? I think? Maybe? Maybe not. It's not entirely clear, because Riot still don't know what Yordles are either. So Fizz is a Yordle, I think. Because, like, the last thing I saw about Fizz was that, right, like, they said he was a Yordle once, but then they kind of walked it back and said, no, he's not quite a Yordle, but he's like a cousin species to the Yordles, but he lives under the sea? Okay, I don't know what the fuck he's supposed to be. Anyway, Riot don't know either. When he was first created, Fiddlesticks was never supposed to be a Yordle. He was never designed to be one. He was designed to be a little frog person who lives in the sea. And has sea adventures with sharks and stuff like that. He was never designed to be Yordle. They retconned him into one when they tried to clean up the cosmology of the League of Legends universe and kind of tried to unify a lot of characters into the Yordle mold. And that kind of leaves me a little confused about, like, should I critique him as a Yordle? Because he doesn't look he looks fuck all like one. Yordles have a very particular aesthetic, and Fizz doesn't really have that. He doesn't really represent that. Like, if he was a Yordle, he should be a sea mammal rather than a fish person or an amphibian. So it's like, anyway. Outside of that, Fizz is, like, fine. He's another one of those, like, he's actually very unique to League of Legends. Like, he's not like anything else I've seen in any other game, but he's also like, oh yeah, if there's a trickster fish character who would be the protagonist of a children's cartoon, that is what it would look like. And so for me, Fizz is like a classic B tier, in the sense that he's a good character design. Like, he's fine. There's not a lot to say about him. He's just perfectly competently executed to do the thing that he's supposed to do. So it's like, yeah, I don't know what to say about him. He's like, everything about him seems so obvious. Like, he's got webbed feet and, like, the little suckers on his head tentacles. All of that is just nautical theming. Which leads us on to Dear Galio. Now, Galio is a character who was a little bit controversial at the time, I think, because when he was reworked, he essentially became a new character. Like, he's one of those reworks where the old Galio was just obliterated from the game. They didn't keep anything of old Galio, like, at all, whatsoever. They just created an entirely new champion, called him Galio, and dropped him into the game. Which I completely understand that some people were not happy about. I kind of want old Gargoyle Galio in the game as well. Or rather, I want a Gargoyle. Like, I feel like a Gargoyle is an obvious character to have in League of Legends, and it kind of sucks that he got replaced with this giant, like, 20 stories tall, mega weapon of war kaiju statue thing. So that kind of sucked, but that's not really the fault of this particular character design. And Galio, as a character, is essentially an embodiment of the might and power of Demacia itself. He's an anti-magic kaiju golem who defends Demacia in their time of need against magical powers that are too powerful for the regular army to handle. And he's a figure of legend more than anything. He's a Colossus. Like, he's literally called the Colossus, in the same vein as the Colossus of Rhodes. And in that sense, it's like, yeah. Like, there's some clever stuff going on here. Like, note the plating across his chest. You can kind of see, it's almost like he's been put together, not carved out of solid rock, but he's been put together from many different pieces of rock that's been overlapped over top of each other, which is a sensible way to make him look like a solid statue, but still create a justification for why his limbs can move independently outside of being, like, magically animated. I like the big golden wings, which, like, both work as wings in terms of letting him fly and do his ultimate, but also just as this, like, crowning glory symbol, like this symbolic representation of the might and glory of Demacia itself, along with the crown thing. Like, he's just a good character design. Like, he's solid. He's not, like, mind-blowing or anything, but he's just a really good, solid character design. He's what I would call a classic A tier. A character that looks very unique to League of Legends, who does exactly what he's supposed to do, and who, like, despite the troubled production history, like, despite the justifiable annoyance at the original Galio being removed from the game, he's just a good character design. Like, there's not much to say about him, because Galio, like, he's had one story with Lux, which I thought was really, really cool. But they've never really done enough with his lore or his story or his personality for me to actually go off of it and talk about him more broadly. So let's change gears and talk ourselves a little bit about a pirate, mateys. Arr. Gangplank of Bilgewater. Arr, yar. Etc. So Gangplank, again, a character with an interesting production history, because Gangplank... Let's see if I can find his old character model for you. Yeah, there we go. There he is. Gangplank used to look like this, which is both like a mess of polygons, but also like, oh my god. I believe that was one of his original looks. Then, he got a minor rework, and I wish I could find this in a better quality, where they gave him a beard so that he looked more like an actual pirate captain. But either way, like, this is kind of... he's just bad. Like, this is a comically, like... What the... It's just a pirate. Like, it's just the world's most generic... This looks like fucking Microsoft Word clip art. Like, that's what this... That's what original Gangplank looked like. He looked like clip art from Microsoft Word. And he was like, just bad in every sense of the word. So... Burning Tides rolls around, and I think this was around 2014, I actually don't remember, and Gangplank gets himself a full visual update. And it's announced with, like, pomp and circumstance, and we get a rollout of... Let me see if I can find it. No, that's not it. Please give me his goddamn splash art, Google. Google, please. Google. Google. Thank you. He's rolled out with pomp and circumstance, and we are shown this version of the man. Gangplank as this prestigious, powerful pirate captain, peeling an orange with his sword, his red-hot sword that he's using to torture whatever poor sap is in the foreground. Prestigious, powerful, at the height of his strength, Lord of Bilgewater, undisputed master of pirates, Gangplank. And then he dies. Misfortune kills him, and he's literally removed from the game for like a few days, and people freaked the fuck out. Like, Gangplank was removed from the game just a few days, and people had they threw an absolute nutty about it. Holy shit, they got mad. That was incredibly funny at the time. And then they revealed that, Gangplank has survived the explosion. He's not actually dead, but he did lose an arm, which has been replaced with some robot parts now. And now, rather than being, like, Lord of Bilgewater, pirate captain at the height of his powers and influence, now he's the scrappy rebel once again. Misfortune has taken over as captain of Bilgewater. And Gangplank now is the privateer, once again, the buccaneer, the guy sailing on the ship, doing the killing and the murdering, and, like, out there being more active, and seeking, of course, his revenge against Misfortune herself. And that creates, like, I think a really interesting pirate character design, because this guy, unlike Captain Gangplank, who looks like a pirate lord more than anything, with his immaculately well-groomed beard and his, like, beautiful coat and all of that nonsense, this guy looks like a thug. Like, this guy looks like someone who murders people for looking at him wrong. He looks brutal, he looks cruel, he looks violent, and he looks powerful. And he's one of the few characters in League of Legends, by the way, where, like, masculine power isn't just bulging muscles. Gangplank doesn't have bulging muscles. He has a thick body. He has a body with a really powerful midriff, and he's not fat as such, but he is, like, he has a little bit of that dad bod thing going on, which is really rare in League of Legends, which is really rare in gaming in general, to have that body where it's like, it's not overly, like, it's not hyper-masculinized. It's not that Brahm, huge, bulging muscle, giant torso bodybuilder physique, but it still looks powerful. Like, it still looks like he could probably lift you with one hand and, like, crush your windpipe. And that's something I really like about Gangplank. Now, he's still kind of a generic pirate design. much like he was in his early days, but he's a generic pirate design that looks like it belongs in Bilgewater, in the specific pirate aesthetic that Bilgewater has, with this mix of like Maori influences, especially with the tattooing, and Mesoamerican influences that you can see especially in the Buru people. Like, all of that is in there, creating like a really strong pirate character design. And he's a little bit generic, a little bit too generic for me to put him in S tier. I kind of want to, but he's an A tier character for me, like, because he's really, really good. Like, if he had a little bit more of uniqueness to him, I'd probably bump him up a notch. But as it is, it's just a really nice execution of the concept. Note, chat likes dads. Oh, not just chat, my friend. Daddies are popular these days. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're a thing. So, we go from a very well-designed, if slightly generic pirate to the most boring man in League of Legends. Garen is and has always been boring. Like, he's a World of Warcraft, he's a Warcraft extra that wandered over. And that's something that kind of weak, like, let me just pull something up. Maps, universe.leagueoflegends.com, and let me go look at the regions and see if I can find the particular image I'm looking for. Because Garen is like the exemplar of Demacia. Like, he's the example of what Demacia is supposed to look like, what it's supposed to be like, what it's supposed to be about. But there's a problem with him, which is that in the modern aesthetic of Demacia, and you can see this especially in Legends of Runeterra, their soldiers tend to look like this. They tend to have this particular aesthetic, very stark, very sparse, lots of white and blue, contrasted against each other, with like a really sleek and kind of modernist aesthetic to it. And Garen is supposed to be the exemplar of Demacia, like the actual example of everything Demacia is supposed to be about aesthetically and visually. And he ain't look like that. He looks like a Warcraft extra. Like, you can see the influence of Warcraft 3 that like filtered up through Dota, and which still persists in League of Legends to this day, with the giant-ass ridiculous shoulder pauldrons, and like the huge bracers on his arms, and then this giant, just generic, ridiculous fantasy sword. Garen is kind of stuck in a different era of League of Legends, where like this made sense as an exemplar of Demacia back in the day, but in the modern state of the game, with like the mage conflict and the whole Demacia as a sort of quasi-eugenicist fascist state and all of that, it's just kind of grown past him. And it doesn't help that Garen himself is like the most generic white boy you've ever seen in your life. Like, how would you describe him except as like 90% of TV actors? He doesn't have a face. He doesn't really have like this. And it's a bit of a pity, because like I really like the ridiculousness of his spin, like Demacia, and then he just swings around and around and around, which is like fundamentally kind of silly. But that doesn't come across in his character design. So for me, Garen is a C tier, because it's like he used to be better integrated. He's a Kyle, yeah. He used to be better integrated with Demacia. Demacia used to align a lot closer to him in terms of its aesthetic and in terms of its themes and theming. It doesn't anymore. Garen is someone who kind of needs not a full visual update perhaps, but an update that just kind of brings him into line with like that stark quasi-fascist aesthetic that modern Demacia has. And we'll talk about that more once we get to Jarvan. Changing gears entirely, let's talk about Gnar. There is no D tier, it's elusive. Anything below C is F. Let's talk about Gnar. Oh, precious little Gnar. Now, Gnar is an interesting experiment, because he is, again, one of those champions who's from somewhat before Riot knew what the hell they were doing with the Yordles. The Yordles, I think, because it's not fucking clear, I think in the modern state of League of Legends, the Yordles are essentially a kind of race of fairies, a race of goblins, as it were, that exist sort of in reality and also slightly outside of it, that take on the characteristics of whatever landscape they happen to occupy. Gnar comes from an era in League of Legends when they were still trying to define the Yordles more as like an actual species, like an actual species of animal, essentially, on the same level as a human or a Vestaya. And so he was supposed to be the prehistoric Yordle who was frozen in ice for thousands of years and then thawed out in the modern day. And then, like, has this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing where he transforms into a giant hulking rage monster whenever he gets excessively angry or excited enough. And so, from a modern perspective, Gnar kind of doesn't fit in with the Yordles as such, but the Yordle concept is also, at this point, broad enough that it can easily incorporate him. He wasn't designed to fit into it, but the concept itself is capable of fitting him into it. So, on that level, like, I'm a little mixed about him, but in terms of his character design, he's adorable. Gnar is such a good boy. Look at his fuzzy little face with his little bone boomerang running around with a big tail in the ears. He's a cutie boy. And I love his voice work. Like, I love the shirky, shirky. Ah! Like, I love the little random noises that he makes. I love the caveman thing that he's got going on. He's cute, he's adorable, and the contrast between tiny, adorable, mischievous, funny little hopping Gnar and the giant hulking rage monster form that he turns into is really, really well executed. Because you can see, like, between the ears and the tusks and like like the nose, you can see elements of Gnar's base form in his monster form. Like, you can see how one could transform into the other Gremlins style. But they're also so well contrasted in terms of, like, this Gnar, monster Gnar is blue and red, whereas, like, normal Gnar has these blue accents, but is mostly orange and purple. And, like, just a really solid character design, and I don't know if I should put him in S tier, but I'm gonna, because he's cute, and I like him. Meganar looks like a monster from Crash Bandicoot. Yeah, there's a little bit of that in there. Like, there's a little bit of that particular aesthetic. Which leads us on to Gragas. Yeah. Gragas. I don't... Yeah. Gragas is a fat, drunken, ugly slob. That's it. That's the joke. He's a fat, drunken, ugly slob. He burps and he farts and he's disgusting and he drinks too much beer or wine or whatever and he fights. He brawls in bars and stuff. He's a complete one note. Like, he's such a one note stereotype character. He has no discernible personality. He has no theme or idea behind him. He's just big, fat, drunk, ugly slob. Ha ha ha. He doesn't, like, he sort of quasi-accidentally fits into the Freljord with his tattoos a little bit. But he has the same problem that Ashe does, which is like, if he's from the Freljord, why the fuck is he running around in just a loincloth? Like, why is that? Why? Why is that the only thing that he wears if he's from the goddamn Freljord? Why does he have these ropes around his arms and his torso? Why is that there? I don't know, because he's old. And he's old. He's an old champion. But even by the standards of League of Legends at the time, he's just like, he's so one note, and it's so tired, and I'm so bored of it. It's like, is that really the best you could do? Fine. So moving on to something that's a lot better. Graves. So Graves quit smoking, by the way. We learned that from Legends of Runeterra, that Twisted Fate finally convinced his boyfriend to quit smoking. Speaking of which, this is kind of a... Twisted Fate and Graves are kind of a Diana and Leona story. That specifically, the writers behind Graves and Twisted Fate fought for a long time internally to make it canonical that Graves and Twisted Fate are bitter ex-boyfriends, and that they have a married couple dynamic, which is something that, again, Riot leadership censored it, they shot it down, they didn't allow it to happen, which the writers, like, I've talked to them, and they're still very salty about that, because that was the one that was, like, supposed to be the one that became canonical. And it certainly was internally at Riot. So, you know, that's annoying, but that doesn't really tie into his character design very much. That's just a fun little production history thing. Graves himself is an interesting experiment in League of Legends because he was introduced essentially as the lone gunslinger cowboy who's chasing down his old partner. Like, where Twisted Fate was already an established character in League, he was this wandering gambler type who wears a cowboy hat and has kind of a Western aesthetic. Graves was designed entirely to complement that, like going with a kind of Clint Eastwoody vibe to him with the cigar and the poncho, traveling the land looking for the man who betrayed him, looking for revenge, like Fistful of Dollars kind of thing. And that works really well for him. In modern times, like, they've turned him into a Bilgewater champion, which makes a certain degree of sense. Like, Bilgewater has a kind of aesthetic that can kind of incorporate all this, but Graves, much like Twisted Fate, ultimately has... Like, he doesn't look like a pirate. He doesn't really look like he's from the League of Legends universe. He looks like he's from a spaghetti western, a fantasy spaghetti western. And... he's iconic enough for League of Legends, and he has enough of a fantasy aesthetic about him that I don't think it counts against him that much. But it does mean that he's an awkward fit for the League of Legends universe itself. It does mean he doesn't, at least to me, he doesn't quite look like he belongs where the game says that he belongs. Still, he's a B tier character for me, for those particular reasons. He'd be S tier if he was naked, obviously. Might as well bring that joke back. And Twisted Fate, by the way, spoiler alert, is going to be very much in the same category. And for people talking about Twisted Fate and Evelyn, yeah, that's not canon anymore. Not since Evelyn's rework at the very least. But Twisted Fate might be bi, you know. He's probably had lots of sex, I'm sure.